My hands weren't built for the hard pen. They were built especially with a large brush. And when I learned calligraphy and I'm learning, I like that response where you don't really know.
Hi Tom, it's pleasure to meet you.
Likewise, yes.
How are you?
I'm okay. I'm okay. You've like it's like you've dug me out of the ground like an old fossil.
No,
Oh,
I have
brilliant.
another podcast with Paul Antonio,
Oh
and
well,
a couple of times, I don't know, somehow you came into the conversation, and he's been recommending you a few times to have you on the podcast, and
that's nice.
because this podcast was on a hold for more than a year, I guess, I don't know.
Yeah,
But I started releasing episodes and recording them again. So you were for a long time on my to-do list for the podcast.
that's nice. Thank you.
So yeah, we're here to talk about your journey in calligraphy,
Yeah,
about your pottery. To be honest, I don't know much about anything about you and your story. I know what you do. Like I've seen your work on Instagram. I
yeah,
know that you have a book, and I think the main points where Paul was like uh, recommending you for was the Trajans, if I'm
yeah,
not wrong.
yes.
So yeah, I want to speak about everything about your whole journey. So can we start with how did you first became interested in calligraphy, and how did everything started for you?
Okay. Before we start, just to say there are some YouTube videos going way back, maybe 7 years, on my channel,
Mm-hmm.
showing writing with a Trajan brush. So you can see that there. My journey. Well, I was 12 years old. I remember it very clearly. I was 12 years old, and I saw this guy um, writing names on a paper with. I didn't know anything. I didn't know what he was doing, but he was writing with a pen in different colors. It was an edged pen, and I just was really electrified by the ribbon shape. And I think we all get that when we do that. It's like, how is that even possible? There's like this perfect geometry coming out of this guy's hands, and I something just went like down my spine, and I thought I must learn that. So I asked him what was he doing, and it turns out he was writing with a quill, and he cut me a quill. And so the first pen I ever used was a quill, amazingly. Of course, I was terrible. I didn't know anything. He said, go away. Here are 10 books you should read. This is way before the days of YouTube and I don't know anything online at all. There was no internet,
Yeah.
and so I just had to study, and like we all do, we just get obsessed, don't we? The ones who stay with it are very, very obsessive about tiny, tiny things until it's just right. So I was like that, and I just was like a kid in my bedroom, night after night, never going to sleep, just repeating these shapes again and again, like we all do. Um, and then something about it, and I started going to classes, and there was a big resurgence of interest in calligraphy in the UK at that time.
Mm-hmm.
This must have been the early 80s, I guess. Early 80s, and the so there were lots of classes coming up, and so I visited many different teachers, and every time I watched them write, I was always amazed by how much life their writing had. It was just so rhythmical, and I understood that it wasn't typography, and it wasn't meant to be identical letters all the time. But on the other hand, there was some consistency in their writing that I just didn't have, and I could never get my writing to have that life.
Mm-hmm.
So I was getting quite disappointed, and this is maybe 5 or 6 years after starting. And then one day I saw the same guy who was an artist, and he was a calligraphic. He was trained calligraphically. He was writing on a big blackboard. It was just a dusty board. He was writing with water with this huge tool. I didn't see this thing before, and it was an edged brush, of course. And he was just dipping the brush in the water, writing these same strokes I saw 5 years earlier on this dusty blackboard. So you've got these incredible, huge, black, swelling, glossy strokes. And I just instantly realized where I'd been going wrong. I'd just been using the wrong tool. So my hands weren't built for the hard pen; they were built for the soft brush. And my body told me instantly, "This you should have been learning that all this long. What a waste of time." So I talked to the guy and I said, okay, this is the real thing. Now show me what to do. How do I use this? And he said, I haven't got a clue. I just bought this brush from the art shop. I'm trying it out. There's this crazy old guy called Edward Katich. I think he may even be dead by now. He wrote a book years ago in the 60s called The Origin of the Serif. If you can find a copy, good luck. Go and hunt that down, and that might tell you how to write with a brush. So of course I'm still only, I don't know, 16 or 17 at this point. So I'm full of naivety and energy, and I just assume everything is possible. So I hunt this book down, and there's one copy in the St. Bride Printing Library in London. I don't know if you've ever visited there. It's a wonderful place, but they had one hardback copy worth, I don't know, thousands of pounds, because it was such a rare book. They hadn't reprinted it by then. It was still the first edition. And I just sat in this library. You weren't allowed to take the book away.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to just sit there, and I sat there every day for 2 weeks memorizing this book. And I also secretly took some photocopies completely illegally. I took some photocopies, and I don't know if you know this book, but it's about it's called The Origin of the Serif, and it's his idea, his thesis about how I mean, I know you know, but maybe the listeners don't know. It's about how the Roman capital letter got its shape, and he's claiming that it got its shape entirely from the way that the brush works. In other words, these large Roman inscriptions were written very quickly on marble with a brush, and then the carving was just a way of fixing that writing in place. So in other words, the Trajan inscription, which is what he studied mostly, was just a piece of calligraphy. That was his claim. That was his claim. He may have been right, he may have been wrong, but that's what he was saying in his book. And at the end of the book, there's a set of rubbings that he made from the original inscription, the proper size letters. They're about, I don't know, maybe 20 centimeters high. And I took these photocopies away with me. I made them all on the clear cellophane sheets. So all I did then for the next, I don't know, 5 years was, again, another obsessive, just get on and do it. I wrote the letter with my brush, a 1/2 inch brush, because that was the right size. Wrote my letter on my wall with a brush. Put the clear photocopy on top of it, and realized just how wrong I was. And then I did it again, put the copy on, and again, and yet, of course, 10,000 times later, whatever, I had my letter A. So then I moved to B. I don't think it wasn't quite as systematic as that, but yeah, essentially, I just wrote and wrote and wrote until my letters matched the original letters. And in doing that, I realized many things about the way the brush should be used. And in particular, in Katich's book, if you look at his letters and the original letters, they're very different. There's lots of things missing in his letters that are present in the original letters. And his argument was, well, the person who wrote the letters would also just carve them out, so they could always fix, they could edit the letters, fix them. But I was a calligrapher. I didn't do stone carving. I didn't edit things. The whole point of calligraphy is you just write the thing and leave it. That's the honest job. So I decided to try and really reproduce the original letters just with simple brush movements. And so I learned a lot more about twisting the brush and pressure and just trying to match the original ductus, working out really what that person was thinking about when they were writing on the wall 2,000 years ago in Rome. And the end result of that was I got to go around the world teaching this subject. So I've taught many hundreds of classes around the world, and then wrote a book about it because I got fed up of telling everybody what all the angles were.
But by this time, how many years were you already into calligraphy?
By the time I finished the book, which took 7 years, maybe 20 years in calligraphy.
Okay, so we have a gap here which I want to talk about, because I think it, like, for me and for the people, the listeners and people who are watching, it's interesting to see the process and how you were from starting to the point where you are now. Do you remember what scripts did you start it with? What took your attention? Was it from the beginning Roman cap? Like, actually, what's the difference between Roman capitals and Trajan's capitals?
Trajan capitals are just one particular script. It's like there's roundhand, there's English roundhand as taught by Edward Johnston, and there's Harley 2904. There's an actual manuscript from which he took his example. So it's the difference between an individual manuscript and a script, a style. So the Trajan letters is one manuscript. I'm going to call it a manuscript because it was written by hand, as opposed to Roman capitals is a much broader idea. Which and the Trajan inscription or the Trajan script is one example of Roman capital letters.
I see. I see.
One thing versus many thousands of things.
Is this the script you started with, or you learned some other things in the beginning?
Oh yeah. So remember, I started with a pen. So I just started learning everything that everybody else knows. I did uncials and roundhand and black letter, as we used to call it in those days. I never used the pointed pen, so that was. I had a go. I tried, but it just didn't feel right. It wasn't the whole point was the geometry for me. It was that thick and thin, without pressing, without any work. It was a lazy way of getting something really beautiful, and that really appealed to me. I don't know, every script there was, that every normal script, italics, all the different kinds of italic. I looked at lots of different manuscripts and tried to copy those. I studied Edward Johnston's work very closely, all his books, especially the ones published after his death. And I talked to the authors, the people who compiled those books, and just got tried to get as deep an understanding as possible of what it means to make formal writing. So I wasn't interested in particular scripts. Of course, I learned very many of them and as much as I could, but I was much more interested in what writing is. What is this thing we're doing all the time? What is this strange torture we make children go through from the year, from very small, we really do push them and push them and push them to make this stuff in a way that we don't push children in any other subject. Children don't come out of school being world-class physicists, but they do come out of school being world-class writers. They've done years, almost half their life by the time they leave school has been spent tiny digital manipulations, the fingers moving in tiny careful ways again and again, hundreds of thousands of times. If we taught children with the same level of detail as we do their writing, they could be amazing experts in anything by the time they're 10 years old. Anyway, that's another subject.
Yeah, but I don't think children are writing anymore. I think schools are becoming more about typing using computers and whatnot.
Yes. So where has all that energy gone? If the teachers used to spend all that time teaching children to write, why aren't they spending all that time and energy teaching them to do archery or dance or woodwork or, as I say, mathematics or chemistry or whatever, anything? But they don't. They've decided that children, even though it's been demonstrated, we can all learn this skill to a professional level as children. They don't assume that's true of anything else. And I think that's just stupid.
Yeah. And do you remember while we were learning all those different scripts, what was the biggest struggle for you, and what was the easiest thing in learning those scripts?
In a way, it was the same thing. It was the hardest and the easiest. The easiest thing was to just sit down and repeat the shapes. And I think just because I had a particularly obsessive mind that let me do that. And the hardest thing was sitting down and making those shapes, because the frustration about not getting it right was absolutely enormous. And I think that's why I just kept on going until I could do it, because it was too miserable not to achieve it. If I tried something else, like, I don't know, sprinting or something more physical, like a high jump, and I would probably given up very quickly, because I wouldn't have the same level of frustration as I did with trying to get these shapes right.
But what do you think motivated you to keep practicing and not give up? Because I know it takes a lot of time, and some people, I don't know, they just don't give up. And what kept you moving and not giving up?
I don't know. Just my mental makeup. I don't like to leave things unfinished, and I don't like to think something that's so trivial as making a letter I shouldn't fail at that, because it's so, you know, there are many much bigger important things to do in life, and it's okay to fail at those things. You know,
Mhm.
we all fail in, you know, marriages and you know, our work and just friends, all the big things. We all fail at those things, and we all, you know, we learn from that failure. But to fail at making a letter C that's only 1 centimeter high, that's devastating. I mean, you feel like, just what's the point in living if you can't even do that? So I think I just kept on going to until I stopped failing.
And from all the scripts that you learned, which was the hardest for you to learn?
That's a good question. And so the hardest script by far was the Trajan script, because it took about 10 years to learn that one script. And
Whoa.
that's because there was no teacher. There was nobody knew how to do this. The only source was Katich's book. And in many cases he made mistakes, and he made too many false assumptions about what was possible. So I had to invent a lot of the script for myself, and that way it took me a huge amount of time. But if you talk about normal calligraphic pen writing, the hardest scripts, I think, the ones where there's a slope, so like italic, where you have to choose the slope and stick with it. I found that
Mhm.
difficult. So when something's upright, you know, all the upright forms, upright scripts, you can get it. You have a very good feeling for what is vertical, and so you can repeat that verticality very easily. Anything sloping takes a long time to get that slope in your head, and then of course you try it again next day and change the slope slightly, but then you've got to keep going at that new one, and so on. So choosing a slope and sticking with it, that was definitely the hardest thing for me.
You said like just vertical, it's easy, but I've seen on workshops that I've done, like when people are beginners, they have a huge hard time even producing just straight lines, you know?
Oh, it's true. It's very true. Yeah, I forget how hard it was right at the beginning. You're right. You're absolutely right. Yeah, we're just not very trained. We're not. It's a very unnatural thing to write. It uses some very fine, careful finger movements and wrist movements, and with a brush, you know, whole arm movements. And like any physical skill, we're just not equipped for it at the beginning. Like, you know, when we're small babies, we're not very good at anything. And if
Hmm.
you in the UK, when you learn to drive a car, you have to learn with a manual car with a gear stick.
Yeah.
And it's in some countries it's all automatic, but in the UK and around Europe as well, you know, and anyone who's learned to drive a car with that gear stick, you know exactly how hard that is. And every now and again there's a and it just doesn't do what you want. And you've got to get your feet going this way and your hand going that way, and you've got to look to make sure you don't crash. And too many things going on at once that your brain, even though your brain understands what to do, your body has no clue. And the only way to train the body is to keep on repeating it again and again and again. And, you know, thousands of times later, you change the gear and you didn't even notice that you changed the gear. It's the same with writing. So the first few thousand times is very painful and noticeable. And then the next few thousand is a lot less painful and a lot more unconscious almost.
At what point in your life and in your journey you knew or maybe decided that this is what you want to do for the rest of your life, or that this is something that you could turn into profession?
Yeah. Well, I so after that 20 years of learning, so I was in my early 30s then. I just published my book, and I was very disturbed by the calligraphic world. I had two objections, and I kept
Okay.
telling people. I made a lot of, I don't know, maybe not enemies, but I lost a lot of friends, I think, by saying these two things. The first one was, I find as a calligrapher, I'm being parasitical. I feel like a parasite. I'm using other people's words and thoughts and ideas, and I'm writing them down, and I rely on their brilliant work to make my work. So first of all, I feel like I'm just like a little leech, you know, sucking the blood out of something. So I feel bad in that way. That's the first thing. And the second thing is I feel completely arrogant. What the hell am I doing? Why am I? These people have written an amazing work of art, a poem, a play, whatever it is, and they expect me, well, of course they don't because they're dead, I expect myself to somehow add something to that great work of art, to introduce a whole new idea that somehow makes it even more brilliant. How arrogant is that? It's the worst, stupidest thing I could imagine. So being a parasite and feeling arrogant, I just thought I've got to leave this subject completely. This is a total waste of time. It's a nonsense activity. I must stop and choose another way of living. And I really did have that period in my life when I thought what a waste of time that was. 20 years down the drain, I could have been learning something much more interesting. And it took me a long time to come out of that. And the way I came out of it, and the way I ended up basically being a full-time calligrapher now, even though it's pottery, I'm still doing calligraphy. All that training is being used. The way I got out of it took another few years, and I sat down one day and just asked myself, you must have spent 20 years doing this for a reason. There must be something about it which is really deeply joyful and meaningful to you. What is it? It doesn't seem to be the words. It doesn't seem to be the literature or the language. It seems to be something else. And for me, it was a really physical thing, especially with a large brush. And when I say large, I'm talking about like 30 centimeters wide, big brush. Have you got one? What have you got? Yeah, exactly. There you go. There you go. Yeah, that's where I live. I understand that brush very, very well. You're holding it wrong though. We have to talk about grip.
Okay. How am I supposed to hold it?
You need to have the end point, the pointed bit has to be touching that part of your hand.
Like this?
No, like let me just show you. So it's like that. So there's a spoon there. So it's like hold it like that. So you can turn it all the way around and use your whole wrist. That's it. Yeah, much better, much more powerful.
Huh.
We can talk about that later. Anyway.
Okay.
So I decided for myself that it was going back to when I was a 12-year-old child watching that guy. It wasn't about letters. That wasn't what was interesting me. It was the movement and the geometry and the shape and the space and the sheer physical nature of this thing, the precision of it, much more interesting to me than what he was writing. And that took me on another direction of abstracting away from letters and just taking the movements of writing and seeing what was left over. So my project was, if you remove language from writing, remove letters, remove characters, remove anything meaningful, is there anything left over that does have some meaning, that has some substance? And I spent a long time trying to answer that question for myself. And the answer turned out to be yes, very much indeed. There's a kind of universal writing underneath all of this formal stuff that we do that emerges when you stop thinking about language. It's just that writing just happens to be very good at transcribing language, and language comes from the word tongue. You know, it's about speech. Whereas writing is a different thing altogether. It uses our hands. It uses a different kind of a part of our brain. It's very good at transcribing language, but that's not all it does. That's just one of the jobs it can do. And the rest of my career in life has been spent trying to understand what that other thing is that writing gives us when we're very good at it. Because like you and I and everybody, many of the people listening are very, very good at this stuff. You can't avoid it, because if you repeat something often enough, like changing the gear in a car, you're going to get good at it. It's unavoidable, because you've got a human body, and that's just the way it works. There's nothing clever about it. But just repeating something in a reflective way, thinking, where did I make a mistake? Let me do that again. You can't avoid getting good at this thing. So what happens when you are good at this thing, but you take away its reason for existing? Is there anything left over? And the answer turns out to be yes. And after a long period of abstraction, and some people use the term asemic writing. I don't like that term very much, but writing without language, I stumbled upon pottery, and that's a whole other.
Yeah, I thought you're going in this direction, but before we go speaking about this, can we go back a little bit? I want to speak about the book.
My book or Package's book?
Your book, like the formal brush writing.
Yes.
So Let's speak about a bit about this book. Like you said, you were quite young when you made it. You said the reason you made it was because you didn't want to explain to everyone the same thing. So can you tell me what exactly is in this book? Who is this book for? And is this book still available somewhere to be ordered?
Okay, so for the last question first, I published the book in 1999. I mean, that's a long time ago now. Wow. Yeah. Oh my God. I mean, I remember it. Yes, I must have been about 30 then. So I, um, I printed it myself. So I approached 10 different publishers and said, "There's this amazing book. You must publish it, please." And half of them didn't answer, I think, because they just thought, "What is this crazy guy talking about?" Five of them came back to me and said, "Yeah, we like the idea, but we don't think we'll be able to sell any copies. We don't know anybody who would buy this." So I thought to myself, well, I was very disappointed. I thought to myself, I do know, probably I know personally the people who would buy it. So, because I've done enough courses by then to meet several hundred people. So I thought, if I print, what was it, 1,000 copies, I think, in paperback and 300 in hardback, I could probably sell those myself, just in classes and online or something, in bookshops. So I borrowed some money, published the book, got it printed. I designed it all myself and printed it. Got it printed in a company near me, and there we are. I just had all these books for sale, and slowly they all sold. So no, that first edition sold out quite quickly, probably after 2 years. And I didn't. Then I lost the computer files. Yes.
Oh.
You remember Quark Express? Anybody? It's a very old typesetting program, I guess you call it. And I don't know what's happened. I don't even know if the software still exists. I gave up at that point and said, well, it was one edition. Everybody who's got it seemed to be quite happy with it, but there are no more. That's it. I think I maybe have 5 copies left in my storage room somewhere.
Really?
Yeah. And if you go onto Amazon, they're like £400 each or something. If you try and get a second-hand one, it's ridiculous.
Well,
I wrote the book, and it was for people who were serious calligraphers who wanted to understand this strange new tool called the edged brush. A little one here, because everybody in the calligraphic world that I ever met treated the brush like a big pen. So they'd hold it like a pen. They'd write scripts like pen-like scripts, and the brush just isn't made for that. It's not. It's got so much more power, and it's so much cleverer than a pen. There's at least 6 degrees of freedom that it can take advantage of, which the pen can't. And so I wrote the book to show how sophisticated the brush was and how many more calligraphic shapes we could make just as easily as with a pen, but so different that the brush can do that the pen can't. Mainly because the brush can be twisted around more than 360 degrees and leave a perfect mark. Whereas a pen can't do that. But there's many other qualities, especially with pressure and so on. So the book was about, here's this amazing tool called an edged brush. Nobody out there knew how to use the brush properly. This book will show you how to use it properly, and the way we're going to learn is to learn this amazing script called the Trajan script, which everybody had seen. The Trajan inscription. Everybody knows that inscription exists. They've all heard of it at least, but nobody I ever knew or talked to could show me how it was written. Even people like John Stevens, you know, he's still originally a pen guy. For all an amazing skill, absolutely much better with a brush than me, but working from a tradition from a pen, not from the original Trajan inscription, for example. So there's a lot that the brush will do that my book was talking about that I'd never seen anybody do. New shapes, and I then did quite a few classes about inventing new scripts using the brush, because I realized there were so many more possibilities calligraphically than we'd ever come across.
Yeah, you said you mentioned a couple of times you were teaching classes. I'm really curious, like how many years after you started calligraphy you decided to teach classes, and how did this happen? Were they people approaching you and asking you to teach them, or you somehow felt that you're ready to teach people?
I'm trying to remember now. I only taught, I taught a few pen-based classes, not seriously though. It's only when I really understood how to use the brush. After that, many repetitions of putting the brush on the wall and putting the letter on the wall and comparing it with the original. Once I got to maybe 90% accuracy, and I realized that I'd understood something that people didn't know, I then started approaching people to teach them, and there were lots of calligraphy groups around the UK, maybe 20, 30 groups in those days. And they all invited me one by one to come and give a course. And then I started getting invitations to international courses, and the SSI was quite strong in those days, and then the Calligraphy and Lettering Arts Society, and then other international organizations. And just, the word gets out. So there's this guy who can use a brush to make Trajans. Oh, let's see what he can do. So yeah, I taught many people to use brush around the world.
So are there any classes that you're still teaching today, people?
So I having dropped calligraphy formally, I haven't taught any calligraphy classes for 15 years, maybe more.
Okay.
But I'd love to. I love teaching. I really enjoy it, and I've still. And now I realize as well, still nobody knows how to use a brush properly.
Okay, maybe if you're interested, then now that you said you haven't taught in 15 years, that makes it even more interesting and cooler. Would you love to make a class with calligraphy masters? It could be online via Zoom like this, so we can organize something if you want.
Certainly, I would love to. Thank you for inviting me. I think that'd be great.
Awesome. So guys, whoever is watching or listening, drop a comment if you're interested for a class with Tom, and we'll definitely work something out.
Thank you.
But okay, I guess 15 years you haven't taught. So let's continue to the pottery, like something that we were talking before we changed the subject. So how did you become interested in pottery? And like, I'm more like interested to hear like how this process of removing language became and got mixed with the pottery.
Yeah. I wish I understood it myself, but I don't really. So I was maybe 15 years ago. I was just looking around for something to do. I had stopped teaching calligraphy. I was stopped doing any calligraphy really, and I was just looking around for another hobby, I guess. I went to a class in throwing pottery on a wheel. So I don't know if anyone's had a go with making pottery, but you have a wheel goes round. There's a lump of clay on the middle, and you wet it with water, and just through the sheer physical forces of the thing going round, you can pull this thing up to make it taller and taller. That's how cups and mugs and bowls get made. You just let the clay flow through your fingers, and it goes up. It's amazing. And the moment I was terrible, like every other thing you ever tried to begin with, you're absolutely rubbish at it. But so was everybody else. So that wasn't the problem. What was interesting to me was that when the clay started to move upwards, it felt completely calligraphic to me, because one of the principles of calligraphy, as I've mentioned before, was there's a freshness about it, aliveness about it, that you don't edit the thing. It just appears, and whatever happened in those few moments, you leave it alone, and it's just an honest record of what happened. Even however formal and careful you're being, it's still full of your life, that you inject your life into that writing. And it's the same with pottery on a wheel. So not hand building. When you make things by hand and you put the pieces of clay together, that's a different process. That's very editable. That's like oil painting, where you can always touch it up or remove a bit. In calligraphy and in throwing pottery, you want to make the thing in real time. It's got to arrive in its own natural way, but without any editing or touching up or altering. You just want to have this thing grow in its own natural way along with you. That's what formal writing at its best, that's one of the qualities it has. And it's the same with pottery. That's one of the formal qualities that really good pottery has, is it looks like it's fresh, like it's just been made. So because of that link, I immediately had in my head calligraphy and ceramics or pottery. Somehow they are the same sort of thing. One's in 3 dimensions and one's in 2 dimensions, but that's the only difference really. Is there a way to kind of fuse these together in a way that makes sense to me? And so I think even on my very first pot, which was terrible, a little bowl, it's got a kind of writing around the outside. And as with all my pottery work, the writing is much better than the pottery. My ceramics is trying to catch up with the 20 or 30 years of experience of the calligraphy. So, what can you do? They're slowly, the pottery is slowly getting better. So,
come on, your work looks amazing.
You're very kind. Thank you. Very kind. But yeah, no, there's still a lot to learn. If I think about where I am in my pottery career compared to my calligraphy career, I've done what 15 years. So when you get to about 20 years of a technical subject like calligraphy, you can start to relax a bit. You can start to get you have a confidence that you hadn't had up to that point because you've tried everything, you found what you like, you've practiced what you like until you really understand it. Yeah, it's about 20 years, which sounds a lot, but when you're an old guy like me, you get lots of chances at 20 years of things. I've had 3 chances so far, almost. Not quite that much, but when you're a 20-year-old, 20 years of anything sounds impossible. It sounds like, how can I possibly wait that long until I'm good enough? And that was like I was exactly the same as that when I was 20. When I was 30, I could just about see the end of the tunnel with brush writing. But now that I've done that twice, I've learned calligraphy and I'm learning ceramics, I'm a lot more relaxed about how long it takes to learn something to do it well. I've got another however many years I've got in front of me, plenty of time to learn something else as well. So I'll just keep going. After a few classes, no, not classes, after a couple of classes, I realized I wasn't enjoying being taught by someone. And I realized, just like the calligraphy, I needed to teach myself. Like I think a lot of us do. There's a lot of autodidactism in calligraphy and in pottery. And luckily, by this time, YouTube existed. So there are thousands of pottery videos on YouTube, thousands. And I've seen nearly every single one, I tell you, often many times. So again, that obsessive thing came into play very usefully. And I just practiced and practiced. I bought myself a wheel, just made many thousands of pieces and shapes until I understood a lot more about how clay works. And I started making more pieces. I joined a studio so I could fire the pieces, because the other thing about pottery is to make them permanent, you need to fire them in a kiln in a big oven, which is very expensive. So I got that. I went to a studio to get that facility, and just started making more and more pots, and they got more interesting for me. And then people started buying a few small things, and by that time, Instagram had become a thing about the pottery making process. And at that time, Instagram was all about still images. In fact, they were saying very clearly, you must, if you want to get lots of followers, you must put up still images, really good still pictures, 80% of the time, and maybe 20% videos, which of course is completely reversed now, 10 years later. But now it's, at that time, that was the way to get ahead on Instagram. But I didn't. I put little videos up, and one of them went viral. So I was just writing on a pot with a kind of pen, like a kind of pen, and it was just abstract writing, my writing without language on this pot, and it just went. In those days, viral meant about 50,000 views, and it made a tremendous difference to the number of people who saw my work. And suddenly my following started going up in a crazy way, because in those days there's no competition, no one making videos about how to make things.
Yeah,
there are a few of us doing it, and we were all doing very well on Instagram. I mean, I've now got 100 and something thousand followers.
160, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, and it's slowed down a lot since the whole thing changed. It's kind of flattened out, but there was a time when it was rocketing upwards, because I just don't think anybody had seen this before. They'd never seen how things were made. And that was wonderful. I mean, I was the same. I was watching people making things. I had no idea that you could even do that. And that's a wonderful experience, seeing a thing coming to life in someone's hands. So Instagram in those days was really wonderful technology. And there was no advertising. It was just all people excited by each other's work. So we had a great time. we yeah, so that was good. But because of that number of followers, I started to feel maybe there's enough people out there who would want to buy my work. I could do this as a job.
Mm-hmm.
It took me quite a long time to get the courage up and to save enough money to quit my job. I just had a normal job at that point. But what I did was I did an auction on Instagram, because with so many followers, you've got a lot of opinions. I put up 5 pieces. I said, okay, who would like to buy one of these? And if so, how much would you be prepared to spend to pay for it? So it was an auction. And I got 2 answers. One was quite disappointing. One was a lot fewer people wanted my work than I thought.
Hmm.
But the ones who did want it were willing to pay a lot more money than I expected. So I ended up being one of those potters or ceramic artists who sell a few things but for more money, and there are others who sell a lot of things for small money. So either way, you know, there is a living to be made. But yeah, I realised it was possible. So since 5 years ago, I think I went full time, and for those 5 years, it's been quite successful and growing. Really loving being finally being a professional full-time artist after all that training.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of your pottery, and I'm wondering, is it all abstract writing, and like how exactly is this taking away the link? Are they even letters, or what exactly is, like obviously it looks like calligraphy, but sometimes when I look into it, I'm like, wait, is this a letter? Like, what is this?
So that's a good response. I like that response where you don't really know, and you don't know, is it a private message from me to somebody else? Is it something I've made illegible but still writing? These are all good questions, and there shouldn't be an answer yes or no, because the whole exercise is about just finding that fine line between meaning and non-meaning,
Mm-hmm.
while still doing something very, very formal and graphically deliberate. So it's not painting. I don't do illustration or painting. I don't know how to do that. I can't draw a cat.
Yeah.
But I'm fascinated by the idea that if you in a class of, say you went to an art class and you put a cat on a stool, and the teacher says, okay, everybody paint the cat, paint a picture of the cat. So on everybody's canvas, they all start working, and at the end, they all turn their canvases around, and yes, everybody's got a picture of a cat on their canvas. Great, and there's the cat sitting there on the stool. Then you take the cat away and you put a letter E, just a letter E on the stool, and you say to everybody, okay, again, when you paint a picture of that letter E, and they all work away, and half an hour later, they all turn their canvases around. And what's really weird is that none of them have a painting of a letter E on their canvas. They all have a letter E on their canvas. It's genuine. It's a real one. It's perfectly any word you want with an E in it. You could use their painting. It is a letter E. So they didn't paint a cat. They didn't conjure a cat out of nothing, but they did create a letter E. And so now we have the original letter E, in some sense, the original. And then we have all these, they're not copies, then they are genuine examples of a letter E. And somehow that's very exciting to me. I like that idea of writing has some properties like that. They're quite magical, and we don't really think about that too much when we're busy practicing our forms and our spaces and writing our manuscripts and making our books. We don't really think of those sorts of magical theoretical properties of writing, and that's what I'm trying to do in my work. I'm trying to slow down, stop thinking about even whole letters. Just what is an individual stroke? What is that made of? What does it represent? What is it? What is its ontology? And doing this on ceramics helps me think about those questions and find answers for myself. I mean, a good example is quite a lot of my work. There's just a single stroke, a single brush stroke on quite often quite a large one. It's just a Trajan stroke. There's nothing. That's all I know how to do. I only know how to make Trajan letters. It's a bit faster than normal. Maybe it's on a curved surface. It's on a strange porous surface, no longer paper or canvas. But nevertheless, it's the only thing I know how to do, which is a stroke from the Trajan script. And when I look at it afterwards, it has its own amazing properties. So just a few seconds of my life was spent making that stroke. It's got all the subtlety and energy I put into it, all the things my fingers were doing, and my body was doing at the time, are all locked into that stroke. And unlike on a piece of paper or canvas or in a book, which is quite ephemeral, this thing now is behind a very, very thin layer of glass. So that's the glaze around the thing, and it's bonded because it's a metallic color. Actually, it's not like paint. It's a metallic color that's bonded to the clay, and clay doesn't degrade once it's been fired. It's permanent. Unfortunately it's completely non-recyclable. But on the other hand, it doesn't degrade. It doesn't biodegrade. So that if you left that pot somewhere safe, it could stay for hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of years, with exactly the same form, just like it came out of the kiln that morning, with my few seconds of life baked into it forever, literally forever. I mean, it might last as long as the sun lasts. So if you sat it on a desert somewhere and just waited until the sun became a red giant in 7 billion years' time, that's how long my pot could, my life, my stroke, my few seconds of being could last that long. And I just love that idea. So it's a way of taking my ephemeral, formal writing, in some big sense, writing, and keeping it forever. It's a kind of immortality that I can't think of any other way of doing.
Just listening to this makes me want to do it myself.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes. We should all have a go. We should all have a go. So one of the advantages of a brush is there are so many other surfaces you can write on, not just paper and canvas. You can write on metal and glass and ceilings and floors and people's skin and pottery. So,
But
yeah.
me looking to this brush, because I have a couple of them exactly the same, and those are not like they're cheap brushes, right? This one that you had in your hand.
This one isn't even a proper calligraphy. No, this is just I think this is a makeup brush. This is nothing. Yeah.
So my point, like my question is, are there any specific brands of brushes that you use or that you like using more than others, or is it even about the brand, or what makes a brush a good brush?
Brush. It's got to have several properties. So I'll show you this one as a cheap, terrible example, just to show you what I mean. So first of all, when it's wet with water and you bring it to a point just through your fingers like that, it should come to a very sharp line at the end. There shouldn't be any little bristles sticking out. There shouldn't be any gaps. It shouldn't split. Sometimes they split like that when they're wet. It should be perfectly straight, clean, very, very thin line at the top. That's one thing. So always, I mean, everybody out there, whenever you buy a brush in a shop, always ask to test it with water first. Never just buy a brush and hope for the best, because they're so badly made in general. You often have to go through 10 or 20 to find a really good one, even with a really good brand. So, and if it's a good shop, if it's a good art shop, they shouldn't mind you dipping it in water and reshaping it, trying it on paper and seeing how it behaves. So that's the second thing. Once you've got it wet and you try it on paper, those bristles should stay together. They shouldn't split apart. They shouldn't distort and and get rid of that thin line at the top. They should also be long enough. So that brush you just showed me now, the very big one, those bristles are too short.
Yeah.
That's why you think it's like a big pen, because it feels too stiff. A proper brush, a proper useful, Trajan brush. If you want to make Trajan letters with a brush like that, you need those bristles to be about 3 times longer than that.
Okay.
So they really flex. But these don't, more like that. That's much better.
Wow.
Even longer, perhaps. I mean, this one, the width is maybe 3 times the length. Sorry, the length is maybe 3 times the width, and that's about right. That's what you want. The other thing is the handles, the length of the handles. So I hold my brush in a strange way that I completely misunderstood a photograph in the Origin of the Serif. So Katic is holding his brush like this. I don't know. Are your viewers seeing any of this?
Yes.
Okay, good. So it's not just a podcast, right? Great.
No.
So excellent. So I wish I had I've been very stupid and left all my tools in my studio, which is miles away. So we're going to pretend this is a brush, this wooden spoon. I hold my, so Katic is holding the brush like this. He's got it in his, let me stand up. He's got it in his palm like this. He's holding it upside down. There's a photograph. You can, anyone who's got that book will see this thing. And he's writing like this. So his hand's upside down and he's writing this way. And it's quite useful. It's quite good to, you can twist the brush a bit. But I don't know what, some my childhood brain completely switched this round. And I was holding the brush, not like that, but like this. I turned it right round. I've now got quite a strange grip. The tip of the brush, sorry, the tip of the handle is touching my palm. I've got my thumb and my first two fingers holding the ferrule, not the ferrule, the round bit. It's easier with a like that. So I've got a tetrahedron. I've got 1, 2, 3 points touching the brush, and then the fourth point touching my palm. So it's very stable. So it turns out to be a very, very stable shape.
Yeah.
And it's much easier if your handle is round rather than flat. So with your very big brush, it's quite difficult because it doesn't work like with the spoon. It doesn't really work. But with a round handle, so that's again a property I would say a good brush should have, a round handle. You can then, if you see that, I can twist this without any pain through not only just 360 degrees, but 360 plus 90, so 450 degrees.
Yeah.
450 degrees without it moving. So I can make all kinds of crazy new shapes that I can't do with a pen at all. And the last thing is this length here. So when you try and unscrew a rusty screw in a wall or a piece of wood, and if you use a very small screwdriver, it's very hard work. If you use a long screwdriver, it's really easy because, you know, Newton told us all about that momentum, the moments of turning, and anyway, it doesn't matter, whatever it is. The longer the handle, you can make a lot bigger effect at the other end.
Okay.
Short handle. So a nice long handle. So if my brush was an inch wide, you know, 2 or 3 centimeters wide, I'd want a handle which is maybe 25, 30 centimeters long. So I'm quite a long distance away from the end. With those big fat brushes, the trouble with the very large ones like you've got there, it's already very heavy. So a lot of you'd be like, you know, you have to do some weight training just to use your brush.
True.
It's still, that's not a good brush to write with, even though we all do. So I don't know who makes that brush, but I've got for that size, I would go with a Da Vinci. I think it's called Da Vinci.
Yeah.
They're really nice.
No, this is not Da Vinci. This is by Urban Calligraphy, a dude from Greece.
Right.
I think
it looks great. It just is. It's not good for Trajan typewriting or for proper brush writing. It's great.
No, this specific one, I think it's made for the streets, like murals and kind of calligraphy stuff, something like this.
It's like a big pen. It really is, and that's nothing wrong with that. Got no problem with that. It's very limited.
Yeah.
In that shape compared to a proper writing brush. And I'm a lone crusader in this, remember? So I don't know what I really don't know why you're talking to me, because I'm just one guy who believes some really weird shit about this stuff that nobody else understands or cares about or wants to know even. So as I say, you kind of dug me out of the ground here, and I'm like a zombie I used to say this and I think this is true, and so, you know, take it or leave it. You can believe me if you want. I took a long time to try and get this right. So I do believe what I'm saying. I do believe the brush is capable of a lot more than we give it credit for. And I found out how to do it, but I don't know all the different possibilities because I haven't had time to try. But if anybody wants to join my little crusade, now that I've been resurrected.
Yes, leave a comment, guys. But I want to ask, how do you approach mistakes and imperfections in your calligraphy, not only in calligraphy, but in your pottery as well?
Yeah.
So how do you approach mistakes and imperfections?
Okay, yes. So early on, with the pottery and with the calligraphy, for the first 5 years, let's say, We're all looking to be perfect. We're all looking to be typographically perfect. Of course we are. And that's our goal. Our goal is to reproduce a shape exactly again and again and again. And I think that's the only way, that's the only attitude you should have at the beginning, because without that, you're doing something undisciplined. You're doing something without a goal. You're doing something that has no measure of goodness about it. You can't tell whether you're getting better or not. It's just that, and you know, everybody who's gone past that 5-year mark or however long it is, you aim for this one point in the distance, and then somewhere near, when you get sort of closer to that point, for whatever reason, you start going off. You think, actually, that's not the goal at all. I'm never gonna design a typeface. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here to write. I'm here to make live, real human marks. I'm here to record myself being in the world on paper or whatever surface. That's why I'm here. And with that end in mind, if I watch anybody, I don't know, walking along the streets, they're not making exactly the same robotic movements each time. There's a slight difference in the wind. There's a slight difference in the shift of weight as they're carrying something, or they notice somebody else on the street. There's a huge amount of complexity that you just don't get in typographic writing. An enormous amount of human. It's not mistakes. It's not. It's a good word would be idiosyncrasy. So just individuality, complexity, subtleness, sophistication about the way a human being exists in the world that robots are having a very hard time understanding, and I don't think they ever could do until they get brains the size of ours. That sophistication will elude them. So you start to you go towards the sort of robotic platonic thing to start with, just because you don't have it. You've got to go somewhere. You've got to head somewhere, and then you veer off and say, actually, no, there's real life to be had here. There's complex, subtle, wonderful life to be had here. Let's go and explore that instead. It's much more interesting. So at that point, you're no longer making mistakes. You're making decisions.
Yeah.
You're letting your body go. You're letting your trained body have its day and decide, I'm going to go this way or this way or this way. And it's no longer perfect. It's no longer that robotic perfection that you aim for. And you're very glad of it as well. Glad to have sort of thrown that away. And anybody, if you remember when I said right at the beginning, my writing never had that life that other famous big calligraphers had in their writing. That's what I'm talking about now. I totally understand that now, what they were doing and why their work didn't have any mistakes in it, but they were all different and all their letters were different, and the mistakes were just their expressions of their life and their living at those few small moments.
It's true. I noticed this in the beginning, and I noticed it because the last few podcasts that I'm recording, people are talking kind of the same things, like we don't need to copy, like to make the perfect letters, which you're exactly right. Before I was trying to produce perfect letters until you realize there are no perfect letters, and we as a calligraphers, we need to put ourselves into the letters, and we cannot do this if we're trying to achieve something that you cannot even achieve, you know.
Exactly. It takes a long time to really appreciate that and to accept it, because it is an acceptance that you'll never make something the same twice. It's a big lesson to learn, and you don't believe it at the beginning. You believe that it is possible, and you need to believe that because you need to do that practice.
But there's something else that you made me think a lot about, it that you said that we're arrogant because we try, for example, we write a quote or a poem of someone, and this made me think a lot, because I remember, I'm not sure which calligraphy, there are probably a bunch of them which I talked about this, but for example, in Asia, in Japan and China, stuff like this, countries which have a huge culture in calligraphy, I know there's some calligraphers, they recommend not to write other quotes or other people words, but it doesn't matter what it is in your head. Even it doesn't need to be beautiful, like to be rhymed or whatever. You as a calligrapher have to write your own thoughts, you know. That was something, the point of it, to be a true calligrapher. But you know, I write a lot of quotes. I write a lot of other people work, and today when you said this, I'm like,
Oh no, oh
like
no. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disturb your whole thought process, but it was a completely personal decision. But I couldn't see how everybody else was arguing against it. I didn't ever hear anybody come back to me and say, "No, Tom, you're wrong because this," and because they didn't, I left. I left the whole calligraphy scene because it didn't make any sense to me anymore. I've found another way around it. So I'm still doing calligraphy, but I've found a completely different way for myself of avoiding that very problem of being arrogant and a parasite.
when when you say it like this, it sounds really bad. Like,
No, I know it was
oh,
bad. For me, it felt really bad. I thought, what a waste of time.
okay, guys, please, whoever is watching or listening, leave a comment. What are your thoughts on this subject? Because I don't know, this disturbed me. Like, it's funny because I mean,
Right.
stuff like this is challenging you, and this is definitely now. I'm like, what are we parasites or what?
Yeah, and you can't just do alphabets either, because that's just very dull. Just
Yeah.
to write out an alphabet. Of course, I'm saying all the things I've done. I've written many poems. I've written many alphabets. I've been as arrogant and parasitical as everybody else. I just made a decision at some point to stop and try and see what else was happening in my calligraphic understanding that was nothing to do with writing or um, language, especially language. And that's our
Mhm.
main problem. We are stuck. If you stay in the normal way of working with calligraphy, you're stuck with language. But
Hmm.
none of us, well, almost none of us are poets. Almost none of us are authors or writers. And if we are, we should be doing that. That should be the main thing we do because that's hard enough by itself.
But we all can be like you said it a couple of times yourself, like everything in the beginning is bad, and with the practice we become better. So I mean, if you haven't written a poem, of course you'll be bad in the beginning.
Yeah, and if you don't write a poem and you don't do all that, then you never get good at writing out lines. You don't understand space between lines. You don't understand relationships between the different parts of the text. You must do those exercises as a learner. But then what?
Hmm.
That's the question I asked myself.
Yeah.
Anyway, you can see why I was buried underground because people don't want to hear this.
No, like I want to hear it. I don't care if no one else wants to hear it. This is my podcast, and
Okay,
I'm talking with people which are interesting to me, and
good for
I'm
you.
pretty sure if they're interesting to me, they'll be interesting to a lot of other people. So
I hope so.
it is what it is. Okay, I have a couple of more questions, and I think we're ready to wrap it. We can always make another podcast
If
and
you,
talk
I've
again.
had fun, so yeah. If you want to talk again, I've got lots more to say.
So I want to ask you, like, uh, of course, you talked about the process of pottery, but I'm curious, like, how much time does it take you from start to finish, like, to make, for example, a vase and until it's ready, and with calligraphy or a stroke on it, whatever you call it, like, what's the whole process and how much time it takes?
Okay, so let's say to make a vase maybe 30 centimeters high, let's say. So that's quite a
Hmm.
small one for me. So throwing the vase, and throwing there's an old English word to throw originally means to twist or turn. So when you throw an American football, actually you have to make it go far. You have to twist it as well, and like
Yeah.
a spear, it goes much further if you twist it as it. So throw the word throw really means to twist or turn. So yeah, throwing on a wheel. That's maybe 20 minutes or something to get the thing up. Then another 10 minutes of trimming it when it's dry. You make it just to make the shape a bit nicer. Then the longest period is letting it dry. So in the winter, we've just finished now, but it may take 2 weeks to dry until it's kind of it's a very fragile, dry clay at that point. Then you put it in the kiln uh, up to 1,000 degrees, and
Wow.
then it comes out of there kind of quite hard, but with a porous surface, and that's the surface I write on. So then I
Hmm.
write my stroke on it, and how long does that take? 1 minute? I don't know, not very long, a few seconds. Then I spray it with glaze, and glaze is a kind of powder that once when it melts, it turns into glass.
Hmm.
So it goes into the after it's been sprayed, it goes into the kiln once more, and the whole thing goes to a higher temperature again, so maybe 12 or 1300 degrees, much hotter, where everything melts. The clay melts, the stroke melts a little bit, the glaze melts a little bit, and they all fuse together in a very strong way, and the whole thing shrinks a lot. All the water disappears from the pot, and it shrinks a huge amount. Then 2 days later, when the kiln is cool enough, you open the kiln, and there it is. That might have taken a month in from start to finish, but touch time, what, less than an hour, maybe.
Okay. In that case, how many pieces do you produce? Like, for let's say for a month, is it something that you're constantly doing, or is it something that from time to time?
Maybe I work every day, sometimes 7 days a week, but there's always things to do that aren't making pottery. There's lots and lots of cleaning. It's a very messy business. You're dealing with mud essentially. So things get messy. You need to wash everything, and the powder when it's dry is very dangerous. If it gets in your lungs, it stays there forever. So you get there's a condition you must very carefully avoid. So you need to wear a mask a lot, washing everything down all the time. So there's lots of washing. You need to prepare the clay as well. So it needs to be you need to get all the air out of the clay. You need to maybe mix the old clay, recycle clay with new clay. What else am I doing? So there's lots of other processes which go on apart from just making. So I maybe make half the time, and then there's emails and dealing with clients and commissions coming in, and people saying, "Where the hell's my pot? You sent it a month ago and it hasn't arrived yet," and all of that. So when you run a business, maybe half of it is very boring and accounts. Yeah,
Yeah, of course.
The other half, there's some kind of nice thing you do on the other half if you got the time. So yeah, I maybe physically sitting down making probably averages maybe 2 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
3 days a
So
week.
in this case, you're doing only when somebody orders, or you have, for example, stuff that people can see on the website or somewhere that they can buy right away?
Oh yeah, so I've had to work out what the business model is for this, and for me there are three outlets. So I have an online shop, and I make things for that. So usually they're quite small things. So there'll be small boxes or cups or bowls, some small vases. So every 2-3 months, I upload all this to the shop. There may be 50, 60, 100 pieces on the shop. And they usually sell quite quickly. So within a day or two, that's mostly all sold out. I also sell through galleries. So some galleries buy work from me and then sell it on at an increased price. And some galleries have they try and sell my work and they take a commission.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a few galleries showing my work, and finally, commissions. So because I make quite large work, then I often get a lot of my work is dealing with individual designers or shops or I don't. It could be anything. Any restaurants. I mean, I'm doing a piece now for a yacht. Someone wants something for a yacht, which is probably quite a dangerous thing to have on a yacht, I imagine. But anyway, it's a variety of clients and customers.
I was about to ask, and now you mentioned galleries. Do you have? Are you making exhibitions yourself, like showing your art?
Yeah. Most of the galleries I deal with have got several artists, and they just have several objects from each artist, and they just try and sell them. And some of them have spaces, and some of them are pop-ups, and some of them they travel around. Every now and again I do a proper, let's say, a proper exhibition. Like a real artistic exhibition where I'm trying to make something interesting, not necessarily commercial, and just some thoughts I've had in physical form. Not very often, because when it's your living, you need to make enough money to keep the roof over your heads and the food in your mouth. So especially if you have a family too. So I'd love to do more exhibitions, but for that I need more time where I don't have to sell work, because usually with an exhibition you don't sell all the work. It's unless you're very, very famous. It's usually a bit too weird for people when they first see it, because it's usually a different sort of thing than what they used to. So yeah, exhibitions are difficult. Maybe one a year. I'd like to do more, but
What does something like this cost? What are the prices for stuff that you create?
My prices. So yeah. So
no, because I have no idea in general, like something like this, what it should cost, and I haven't checked your website. That's why I'm asking.
Okay, so maybe a mug, just a normal. I've got no. I should have equipped myself. Sorry.
It's all right.
Normal handmade mug. One of mine, probably about £40. So like 45 euros, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
A bowl, £30. A vase, a 30 centimeter vase, maybe 600. 35 centimeter, maybe 900. I do vases which are maybe 60 centimeters high and even taller, and they're several £1,000s each.
In this case, do you have something that you prefer yourself or you enjoy more than other to create?
Oh yeah. I want to, because of my experience with big brushes, I want to make pieces which are my size eventually. And it's very
Okay.
learn to do this, and you need a bigger. I haven't got a big enough kiln really, but I'd like to make something maybe 2 meters high would be perfect for me, because then I can use my whole body to make the writing. And that's what I really want to do. That's what I used to do on canvases with big brushes. I don't know if you've seen any images of mine. Sorry, I've got a cold here. I don't know if you've seen any images of mine on with the outdoor work. So I did a lot of murals for a while. They were very big, so 200 meters long, that kind of thing. And
Okay.
I really enjoy that live making of huge calligraphic work. Really enjoyed that.
Awesome. I'm working on some secret project. It's probably about next year. I cannot share right now, but I'll have you in mind because of what you just said. So I might I might invite you to something cool, but for now I cannot speak about it.
Oh, that's intriguing. Thank you. Well, I'm always up for something cool. That'd be great.
Yeah. Well, like I think I mean there's always a lot of questions that I ask, but I think pretty much what was interesting to me I've
Okay.
asked. So guys, if you have other questions, Tom, please feel free to drop them in the comments. As I said, and as with all other guests, we can always record something else. So if there's interesting questions, we'll be ready to record something else. But for now, is there something that I haven't asked you, but you wanted to share or speak about?
I don't think so. I can give you some links to some of the online, like that Trajan writing, for example.
Sure. Whatever you send me, I'll put it in the description. Guys, I'll leave also the website of Tom and classes. Everything that we spoke about will be linked in the description. Just for the end, is there something that's like a tip or advice or whatever for the people who are watching or listening that may be considering start calligraphy or maybe even pottery, just something to leave them?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think don't. So I've talked a lot about obsession and dedication, and trying to get to that point over there. If it feels like a fun to you, if there's some fun, a little exciting thing that happens when you put your pen on the paper, or a little exciting thing when you first touch the clay and it's going round on the wheel, or whatever it is you're doing. If you have that, you'll be absolutely fine. If you don't have that, and it's just it's kind of work, and you like learning piano as a kid or something that you never really, you thought you should do it, or you felt that someone told you should do it, then just don't touch it. Don't touch it. You've got to have that little bit of joy every single time you put the pen on the paper. Otherwise, you'll never get anywhere. And if you have that, you'll get wherever you want to go.
Awesome. I think this is a great ending. Thank you, Tom, for being guest on the podcast. It's been a huge honor and pleasure listening and talking to you. And I hope we talk again, and hopefully maybe even we meet in person.
That would be wonderful, because next time I want to find out about you. This is that you're a whole new generation for me that I haven't come across, and just like you don't know me, I don't know you, but I think I'd like to. So we should, next time we should have more of a.
It's funny because last week I made a story on Instagram, asked people like, what are the guests they want to see on the podcast. And I was not expecting, but like a number of people were like, you should be the guest on your podcast, and I'm like, what?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you're the
Well,
famous one here. Remember that. You're the famous one. So
no,
yeah, let's do that next time then. Okay, I'll interview you.
well, we'll see. We can do something about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay, Tom, thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening. Make sure you like the video, subscribe, share with friends, leave a comment as always. Keep writing.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.